The medical bay examination took 6 hours and involved equipment Katie had never seen before. Alien doctors used scanners that analyzed her brain chemistry, neural pathways, and genetic markers, while human medical staff monitored her vital signs and psychological responses. Katie felt like a specimen being studied under a microscope, which was ironic considering what had happened in the xenobiology arena. Dr. Alex Carter arrived on an emergency transport from Earth 12 hours after the incident. The human xenopsychologist was tall and thin with silver hair and intense green eyes that reminded Katie of her professors back home. Dr. Carter had spent 20 years studying the psychological differences between human and alien minds. He was one of the few experts who might understand what had happened with the nightmare stalker. "Katie, I've reviewed the security footage from the arena multiple times," Dr. Carter said as he sat down beside her hospital bed. "What you did should have been impossible according to everything we know about nightmare stalker psychology. Keep telling everyone I didn't do anything special. I was just interested in how the creature generated its fear effects." Dr. Carter pulled up holographic displays showing brain scans taken during the incident. Katie's neural activity patterns appeared as colorful waves and spikes that meant nothing to her but seemed very significant to the doctor. "These scans show that your brain registered the creature's psychological attack. Your amygdala and other fear response centers were definitely stimulated. However, your prefrontal cortex remained fully active throughout the encounter. You were experiencing fear, but your rational mind stayed in control. Is that unusual? For most galactic species, yes. When a nightmare stalker focuses its attack on a specific target, the fear response typically overwhelms all higher brain functions. The victim becomes incapable of rational thought and either freezes completely or flees in panic." Dr. Carter explained that humans had evolved under different pressures than most galactic species. Earth's diverse and dangerous environment had selected for beings who could think clearly during threatening situations. Humans had learned to use their fear as information rather than allowing it to control their behavior. But why did the creature back away from me? I wasn't threatening it. That's the fascinating part. We've been studying the bioscanners that monitored the nightmare stalker during the incident. When it focused its attack on you, the creature's own stress indicators spiked dramatically. The data showed that the nightmare stalker had experienced something like a feedback loop when its psychological attack failed to work properly on Katie. The creature was accustomed to feeling its victim's terror increase under its influence. Instead, it encountered a mind that acknowledged the fear but continued functioning normally. "Think of it like an echo chamber," Dr. Carter explained. "The creature projects fear and expects to receive that fear reflected back, amplified by its victim's panic. When you remained calm, it created a null space that the creature couldn't understand or navigate." Galactic xenobiologists arrived throughout the day, bringing more sophisticated equipment to study both Katie and the recorded data from the arena incident. Representatives from 12 different species wanted to understand how a human had accomplished something that their best military forces could not do. Dr. Elena Santos was a Valorian xenopsychologist who had worked with human subjects before. Her compound eyes could detect subtle changes in human behavior that other species missed. She was particularly interested in Katie's emotional responses during the encounter. "Humans process fear differently than other species," Dr. Santos observed. "Most beings experience fear as an overwhelming force that demands immediate action. Humans seem to experience fear as one input among many to be considered and analyzed." Katie found the attention overwhelming and slightly ridiculous. She had simply observed an interesting creature using the scientific training she had received on Earth. The idea that this made her some kind of psychological warrior seemed absurd. Captain Murphy visited her in the medical bay that evening with disturbing news about the station's reaction to the incident. Students from multiple species had requested emergency transport back to their home worlds. Many claimed they no longer felt safe studying alongside humans who could apparently neutralize psychic predators. The Galactic Council has called an emergency session to discuss the implications, Captain Murphy told her quietly. Some species are arguing that humans should be classified as a psychological warfare threat. That's crazy. I'm just a biology student. I know that, and you know that. But what happened in that arena has changed how the galaxy sees our species. A human faced down something that has terrorized civilizations and made it retreat through simple fearlessness. The news feeds from across the galaxy were filled with reports about the incident. Some species hailed humans as potential saviors who could protect them from psychic predators. Others expressed concern about sharing space with beings who seemed immune to fear-based attacks. The debate was becoming increasingly heated as different factions formed around humanity's role in galactic society. Zix visited Katie later that night, moving carefully and speaking in whispers. The Valorian seemed afraid that other students might see her associating with the human who had frightened a nightmare stalker. The dormitories are nearly empty, Zix reported. Half the students have left the station and more are requesting transport every hour. The Corvallan warriors are particularly disturbed because their culture values bravery above all else, but even they were paralyzed by the creature's attack. What does everyone think I am? Some kind of monster? Zix's compound eyes reflected the room's lighting as she considered the question carefully. They think you are something new. A human who can face the galaxy's greatest fears without flinching. Some species see this as wonderful protection, while others see it as a terrible threat. The investigation continued for several days as experts tried to understand exactly what had happened in the arena. The Nightmare Stalker remained in maximum security containment, but refused to approach any barrier that faced toward the areas where Katie might be present. The creature seemed to have developed a permanent fear response to her proximity. Dr. Carter shared his preliminary findings with Katie during one of their daily sessions. The data suggested that humans possessed a unique combination of psychological traits that made them highly resistant to fear-based mental attacks. Humans evolved as persistence hunters who needed to remain calm during long, dangerous pursuits of prey. You also developed complex social structures that required understanding multiple perspectives simultaneously. These traits combine to create minds that can acknowledge fear without being controlled by it. So other humans would react the same way I did. Probably not exactly the same way, but likely with much more resistance than other galactic species. Your specific response may have been enhanced by your scientific training, which taught you to observe and analyze rather than simply react emotionally. The broader implications were staggering. If humans were naturally resistant to psychic predator attacks, it could revolutionize how the galaxy dealt with creatures from the void reaches and similar hostile environments. Worlds that had been abandoned due to nightmare stalker infestations might become habitable again with human protection. However, the political ramifications were equally significant. Several species began calling for restrictions on human expansion into their territories. Others demanded that humans be required to serve as guardians against psychic threats. The delicate balance of galactic politics was shifting in response to a single undergraduate student's reaction to a frightening creature. Professor Veltar visited Katie near the end of the week, looking much more composed than he had during the arena incident. The reptilian being's scales had returned to their normal green coloration, and his movements seemed steady again. "I owe you an apology, Katie. I should have better prepared all students for what they would encounter during the practical examination." "You couldn't have known what would happen, Professor. I didn't even know myself." The court-martial chamber was larger than Jake had expected. Rows of seats filled with cadets and instructors from dozens of species, all come to watch the human who had dared strike a superior officer. At the front of the room, 3 judges sat behind a curved bench. Admiral Corinth was a megalon whose gray skin bore the scars of countless battles. General Vex was a Vorthan with scales that had dulled to black with age. Between them sat Chancellor Moira, an ethereal so old that her misty form seemed to flicker like candlelight. Jake sat at the defendant's table wearing dress uniform that felt strange after days in detention clothing. His hands were free, but 2 peacekeepers stood ready behind him. Across the room, Commander Zexthul sat with his jaw wired shut, metal braces holding the broken bones in place. The reptilian instructor's yellow eyes burned with humiliation and rage. The prosecutor was a sharp-featured crystalline being whose body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. Her voice rang like struck glass as she outlined the charges. "The defendant stands accused of assault on a superior officer, conduct unbecoming a cadet, and violation of Academy discipline protocols," she announced. "These are serious charges that strike at the very foundation of military order." She spent the next hour detailing Jake's crime, playing security footage of the punch that had broken Zexthul's jaw. The video showed the attack from multiple angles, each one making Jake look more violent and out of control. The prosecutor painted him as a dangerous primitive who could not handle the stress of advanced military training. "This human lost his temper like a wild animal," she declared. "He responded to words with violence because his species lacks the emotional control necessary for civilized military service." Jake's defender was Captain Torres, a human officer who had graduated from the Academy 15 years earlier. She was one of only 12 humans to hold senior positions in the Federation military. Her dark eyes were calm as she stood to present Jake's defense. "Members of the tribunal," she began. "What happened in that training bay was not a crime, but a revelation. For too long, the galaxy has underestimated humanity because we chose to let them underestimate us." She activated a holographic display that showed data about Earth and its inhabitants. Numbers and charts filled the air above the courtroom, painting a picture of humanity that most of the alien observers had never seen. Earth is a high-gravity world with surface conditions that would be considered hostile by galactic standards, Captain Torres explained. "The atmospheric pressure is 30% above Federation norm. The solar radiation levels require natural adaptation that most species could not survive." Dr. Yilan rose from the witness section and moved to the stand. Her ethereal form seemed to glow brighter under the courtroom lights as she began her testimony. "I have spent the past week analyzing human physiology based on data from the Academy's human cadets," she said. "What I discovered challenges everything we thought we knew about this species." She activated her own display, showing cross-sections of human muscle fiber and bone structure. The images drew gasps from observers who had never seen such detailed anatomical data. "Human bone density averages 2.1 times Federation standard," Dr. Yilan continued. "Their muscle fibers contain a protein composition that generates force at rates previously thought impossible for biological tissue. Their cardiovascular systems can increase blood flow by up to 400% during stress responses." Jake watched the tribunal members lean forward with interest. Even Commander Zexthul seemed fascinated despite his obvious pain. Most significantly, Dr. Yeelan said, humans possess a natural combat enhancement system they call adrenaline. This biochemical response transforms them from peaceful beings into combat-capable organisms within seconds. Under galactic law, this would be classified as performance-enhancing drug use if it were artificially induced, the prosecutor objected. This testimony is irrelevant to the charges. The defendant struck a superior officer regardless of his species' capabilities. Chancellor Moira raised a misty hand for silence. "The tribunal will determine relevance," she said in her musical voice. "Continue, Doctor." Dr. Yeelan nodded and changed her display to show healing rates and pain tolerance data. Human recovery from injury occurs at rates that our medical models cannot fully explain. They can continue functioning with damage that would incapacitate most Federation species. Their pain tolerance appears to have no measurable upper limit. She paused and looked directly at Jake before continuing. Most remarkably, humans appear to be persistence predators. They evolved to hunt prey by chasing it until it collapsed from exhaustion. This means they are naturally built for endurance that surpasses any known species. They do not have claws or natural armor because they never needed them. They simply outlasted everything else on their world. Captain Torres returned to the stand as Dr. Yeelan finished her testimony. Members of the tribunal, Cadet Murphy did not lose control in that training bay. He made a conscious decision to stop holding back after weeks of insults and deliberate provocation. She activated another display showing Academy training records. Every human cadet at this academy has been performing below their actual capabilities because they were taught to be careful not to injure their alien classmates. They were told their natural strength might be dangerous to others. Jake felt a chill as he realized where the defense was heading. The truth is that humanity downplayed our capabilities during first contact negotiations, Captain Torres said. We were afraid that if the galaxy knew what we were really like, they would see us as a threat rather than potential allies. She walked closer to the tribunal bench, her voice growing stronger. But Commander Zex Thul's insults revealed something important about galactic attitudes toward new species. He assumed weakness where there was actually restraint. He mistook our choice for peaceful cooperation as evidence of natural inferiority. The courtroom was completely silent now. Jake could hear his own heartbeat as Captain Torres delivered her final argument. Cadet Murphy's punch generated 4,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, she said. This is not the action of a weak creature having an emotional breakdown. This is what happens when you push a human past their breaking point and they decide to show you what they are really capable of. She gestured toward Jake, who stood at attention despite his nervousness. The question before this tribunal is not whether Cadet Murphy broke regulations by striking his instructor. The question is whether the Academy is prepared to train humans according to their actual capabilities rather than the limitations we have imposed on ourselves. Admiral Corinth spoke for the first time, his voice like grinding stone. Are you suggesting that Commander Zex Thul deserved to be attacked? I am suggesting that Commander Zex Thul made a fundamental error in judgment, Captain Torres replied. He assumed he was dealing with a weak species that would accept abuse without response. Instead, he discovered that humans are apex predators who have spent centuries learning to control their natural instincts for the sake of civilization. The tribunal recessed to deliberate. Jake sat in the defendant's chair and watched the courtroom, empty except for the human cadets who remained to support him. Lisa caught his eye and nodded encouragement from her seat in the front row. When the tribunal returned an hour later, Chancellor Moira spoke for all three judges. This case has revealed disturbing gaps in our understanding of human capabilities, she said. It has also highlighted the need for significant changes in our training protocols. Jake held his breath as she continued. However, discipline must be maintained. Military order cannot survive if cadets believe they can strike instructors who displease them, regardless of provocation or species characteristics. Jake felt his heart sink, but Chancellor Moira was not finished. Therefore, this tribunal finds Cadet Murphy guilty of assault on a superior officer. However, we also find that the circumstances were extraordinary and that the Academy shares responsibility for failing to properly understand the species under its instruction. She paused and looked directly at Jake. Cadet Murphy, you are sentenced to 30 days of additional training under direct supervision. You will not be expelled or returned to Earth. Instead, you will help us develop new training protocols that account for human capabilities. This academy needs to learn how to properly train apex predators, and you are going to teach us how. 6 months had passed since the incident that changed everything at the Nexus Military Academy, and Jake Collins barely recognized the institution he had first entered. The changes went far deeper than new security protocols or revised training procedures. The fundamental understanding of what it meant to be human in galactic society had been transformed in ways that rippled across the entire alliance. The most visible change was in how other species interacted with human recruits. Gone were the casual dismissals and condescending comments about Deathworlder primitives. In their place was a careful respect that bordered on wariness among some species and genuine fascination among others. Jake found himself treated as both a valuable team member and a potential threat depending on the situation. Amy had become something of a celebrity in the Academy's research circles. Her collaboration with Dr. Keth Ara on documenting human capabilities had produced findings that were being studied by xenobiologists across the galaxy. Their work revealed layer after layer of evolutionary adaptations that had been hidden beneath humanity's carefully constructed facade of harmless cooperation. The research showed that humans possessed not just superior physical capabilities, but psychological traits that made them uniquely effective in military operations. Their ability to form intense pack bonds meant they would fight with desperate ferocity to protect their comrades. Their pattern recognition skills allowed them to predict enemy behavior with uncanny accuracy. Most importantly, their capacity for controlled violence meant they could escalate from peaceful negotiation to lethal force with a speed that left other species struggling to adapt. Vextar had become an unwilling symbol of the new understanding about human nature. His arm remained in a permanent support brace that served as a constant reminder of what happened when someone underestimated human protective instincts. The injury had healed as well as medical science could manage, but he would never again possess the speed and precision that defined Zenthari military excellence. The irony was not lost on anyone that Vexitar had become one of the most knowledgeable advocates for respecting human boundaries. His family's investigation into human military history had revealed disturbing patterns that changed how the Zenthari viewed their new galactic neighbors. Every species that had underestimated humans in the past had paid severe prices for their assumptions. The Zenthari military archives contained records of early skirmishes with human colonial forces that had been dismissed as minor border disputes. Re-examining these conflicts in light of Dr. Cathara's findings revealed tactical innovations and combat effectiveness that had been attributed to luck or superior technology. The truth was far more unsettling for a species that prided itself on military supremacy. Human forces had consistently outperformed expectations not through advanced weapons or numerical superiority, but through psychological warfare and tactical flexibility that exploited the rigid thinking of their opponents. They fought like predators, who understood that survival meant adapting faster than their enemies could respond. The Academy's training programs had been quietly revised to account for human capabilities in psychology. Mixed species teams now included specific protocols for utilizing human tactical thinking and combat instincts. More importantly, instructors emphasized the importance of treating all team members with respect regardless of their species' perceived status in galactic hierarchy. Jake found that his reputation had evolved from promising recruit to something approaching legendary status among certain circles. Stories about the incident had grown in the telling until some versions made him sound like a superhuman warrior capable of defeating entire squads of Xanthari fighters. The reality was both more mundane and more frightening than the rumors suggested. The truth was that Jake had simply reacted according to instincts programmed by millions of years of evolution. Any human in the same situation would have responded similarly when their mate was threatened. The calculated precision of his response had been the result of subconscious knowledge about anatomy and leverage that all humans possessed but rarely needed to access. Lisa Brooks had used the incident as a launching point for her own research into human military psychology. Her analysis of historical conflicts revealed that humans had been unconsciously hiding their true capabilities from the galactic community since first contact. The diplomatic strategy of appearing harmless while building trust had been devastatingly effective. The implications went far beyond military applications. Human traders and colonists throughout the galaxy were being reevaluated by local authorities who suddenly realized they might be hosting apex predators rather than harmless refugees from a dangerous world. Some colonies requested additional security, while others began treating human residents with newfound respect. Jake's relationship with Amy had deepened during the months following the incident. She had stood by him during the investigation and disciplinary proceedings without hesitation. Her testimony had been crucial in establishing that his actions were defensive rather than aggressive. More importantly, her research work had helped the galaxy understand why the incident had been inevitable given human psychology. The couple had become something of a case study in human pair bonding behavior. Xenobiologists were fascinated by the intensity of protective instincts that male humans displayed toward their chosen mates. The willingness to face any threat regardless of odds or consequences was seen as both admirable and terrifying depending on perspective. Their graduation ceremony was attended by representatives from every major species in the Galactic Alliance. Jake received his commission as a tactical officer, while Amy was assigned to the Advanced Xenotechnology Research Division. Both had graduated with honors despite the controversy that had surrounded their academy experience. The most surprising attendee at the graduation was Vextar himself. The former Xanthari warrior had requested permission to attend despite his medical discharge from the academy. His presence created an uncomfortable moment until he approached Jake and Amy directly. Vexatar's apology was formal and sincere according to Xanthari cultural traditions. He acknowledged that his actions had been dishonorable and his assumptions about human capabilities had been dangerously wrong. He asked for no forgiveness, but wanted to publicly recognize the truth about what had happened between them. Jake accepted the apology with grace that impressed the watching dignitaries. He spoke about the importance of learning from mistakes and building better understanding between species. His response demonstrated the same controlled restraint that had made his violent reaction so shocking to those who witnessed it. The Academy's new unofficial motto had spread throughout the galactic military. A human's greatest strength is not their endurance, intelligence, or adaptability. It is knowing exactly how much force is needed to make a point, and having the restraint to use only that much usually. The final word carried implications that made even veteran warriors think carefully about their interactions with human personnel. Amy's final research report became required reading for all diplomatic and military personnel who worked with humans. Her documentation of human capabilities included recommendations for avoiding situations that might trigger protective responses. The guidelines were written with scientific precision, but their underlying message was clear. Treat humans with respect or face consequences that could not be easily predicted or controlled. Jake's first assignment was to a mixed-species rapid response unit that specialized in crisis intervention and tactical operations. His human psychology and combat capabilities were now seen as valuable assets rather than dangerous unknowns. The unit commander, an experienced Altarian, had specifically requested human personnel after reading the Academy research reports. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about making assumptions based on appearances or incomplete information. Humans had been underestimated because they chose to present themselves as cooperative rather than threatening. The wisdom of that choice was now being debated in diplomatic circles throughout civilized space. The story of Jake Collins and Vextar became a teaching tool used in military academies across multiple species. It illustrated the dangers of prejudice and the importance of understanding the true nature of potential allies and enemies. The incident served as a reminder that in a galaxy full of diverse species, appearances could be not just deceiving, but potentially fatal. As Jake looked back on his time at the Academy, he realized that everything had changed not just for him, but for humanity's place in galactic society. They were no longer seen as harmless primitives who had gotten lucky enough to survive on a dangerous world. They were recognized as the apex predators of that world who had chosen cooperation over conquest, but retained all the capabilities that had made them successful hunters. The new understanding brought both opportunities and responsibilities. Humans would be respected and feared in equal measure by species who now understood what they were truly capable of when pushed beyond their limits. The challenge would be maintaining the peaceful integration that had brought them into galactic society while accepting their true. The transport ship shuddered as it landed on the surface of Kepler 442c. Jake Murphy pressed his face against the small window and watched the massive structure of the Galactic Military Academy rise from the rocky terrain. The building looked like a crystal mountain with metal roots digging deep into the moon's surface. Ships from dozens of worlds sat in the landing bays, their designs as different as the species that built them. Jake felt his stomach twist with nerves. Back home in Texas, he had been the strongest kid in his town. He could lift hay bales that took 2 other boys to carry. He could run for hours without getting tired. His father always said he was built like a bull and twice as stubborn, but that was on Earth, among humans. Here he was about to train alongside beings that could tear through steel with their bare claws. The ship's door hissed open and Jake grabbed his small bag. The artificial gravity felt strange under his feet. Lighter than Earth, but heavier than the transport. He walked down the ramp with 23 other human cadets, the largest group Earth had ever sent to the Academy. Most of them looked as nervous as he felt. Lisa Carter walked beside him, her blonde hair tied back in a tight ponytail. She had been a boxer before joining the program, and her hands showed the scars from years of training. Unlike Jake, she seemed excited rather than worried. Her green eyes sparkled as she looked at the alien ships around them. "Look at the size of that thing," she whispered, pointing at a massive vessel with curved wings and glowing panels. "Must belong to one of the big species." Jake nodded but said nothing. He was too busy trying not to stare at the other cadets already moving through the landing area. A group of megalons walked past, each one standing nearly 8 feet tall with gray skin that looked thick as armor. Their faces were flat with small eyes set deep in heavy bone ridges. They moved slowly, but Jake could see the power in their massive arms and legs. Near the academy entrance, a pack of Vorthons raced each other across the open ground. They looked like giant lizards that had learned to run on 2 legs. Their scales caught the light from the artificial suns above, and their long tails helped them balance as they moved faster than any human could sprint. One of them turned its wedge-shaped head toward the human group, and Jake saw rows of sharp teeth in its smile. "Fresh meat," the Vorthon hissed in accented galactic standard before racing after its packmates. Lisa's hands curled into fists, but Jake put a hand on her arm. "Save it for later," he said quietly. "We need to pick our battles." They followed the signs toward the main building, walking through corridors that stretched higher than any building Jake had ever seen. The walls showed videos of famous battles from across the galaxy, with warriors from every known species fighting against pirates, rebels, and monsters from the dark spaces between stars. Jake noticed that none of the videos showed humans. Earth was too new to have any heroes worth celebrating. The orientation hall was enormous. Thousands of cadets sat in groups based on their species. The humans clustered together in one small section while the other species spread out across most of the space. Jake could see crystalline beings that looked like walking diamonds, gas bag creatures that floated instead of walking, an insect-like species with too many arms and legs to count. A hologram appeared at the front of the hall. The figure was tall and thin with pale blue skin and large black eyes. Its voice filled the room without effort. "Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy," it said. "You represent the finest warriors from 47 worlds. You are here because your species has proven itself capable of protecting the Federation and its values. You are here to become the guardians of peace in our galaxy." Jake felt a surge of pride. Earth had fought hard to earn its place in the Federation. The first contact wars had been brutal, but humans had proven they could fight alongside the other species when it mattered. During your training, you will be pushed to your limits and beyond. You will learn to work with species different from your own. You will discover strengths you did not know you had, and overcome weaknesses you thought would defeat you. Some of you will not graduate. Some of you will not survive. The hologram paused, and Jake felt the weight of those words. He had heard the stories about training accidents and cadets who pushed too hard too fast. Your instructors are veterans of real combat. They have earned their positions through blood and sacrifice. You will treat them with respect. You will obey their orders without question. They will make you into weapons worthy of the Federation uniform. The orientation continued for another hour with details about schedules, rules, and expectations. Jake tried to pay attention but found his eyes wandering to the other species around him. A group of megalons sat 3 rows away, their massive forms making the seats creak under their weight. One of them caught Jake looking and flexed its arm, showing muscles like steel cables under gray skin. When orientation ended, the cadets were divided into training groups. Jake was relieved to see Lisa assigned to his group, along with 6 other humans. The rest of the group included 4 megalons, 3 Vorthans, 2 crystalline beings, and something that looked like a walking tree with too many branches. There, Instructor appeared as they gathered in the training bay. Commander Zexthul stood 8 feet tall with dark green scales and yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the artificial light. His arms ended in hands with 4 fingers tipped by curved claws. His tail was thick at the base and tapered to a point that looked sharp enough to punch through metal. "I am Commander Zexthul," he said, his voice carrying easily across the training bay. "For the next 6 months, I will attempt to turn you pathetic creatures into something resembling soldiers. Most of you will fail. Some of you should not even be here." His yellow eyes settled on the human cadets, and Jake felt like prey being studied by a predator. "The Federation has lowered its standards to accommodate certain species," Zexthul continued. "Species that lack natural weapons, natural armor, or natural speed. Species that evolved on soft worlds where the greatest danger was deciding what to eat for dinner." Jake felt his face flush with anger but forced himself to stay silent. Beside him, Lisa's jaw was tight with controlled rage. "We will see if these soft creatures can survive real training designed for real warriors," the commander said with what might have been a smile. "Training begins at dawn. Do not disappoint me more than I expect." As the group dispersed, Jake heard one of the megalons laugh, a sound like grinding stone. The training bay suddenly felt very cold and very far from the warm Texas plains where Jake had grown up. But he had not come this far to give up before the real test began. 6 months later, Jake stood in the same training bay where he had broken Commander Zexthul's jaw. But everything else had changed. The climbing wall now had handholds sized for different species, including humans. New equipment designed for endurance training sat alongside the traditional strength-based apparatus. Most importantly, the attitude in the room was completely different. "Humans, take position at the endurance course," called Instructor Vex Han, a young Vorthon who had replaced Zexthul as the primary combat trainer. "Megalons, you have the strength stations. Crystalline cadets, defensive formations today." Jake moved to the endurance course with Lisa and the other human cadets. The course was brutal by any standard, a 10-mile run through variable gravity fields, obstacle climbing, and combat simulation that would last for hours. It had been designed specifically to challenge human capabilities rather than accommodate human limitations. The Megalon cadets no longer made jokes about weak humans. They had learned what happened when humans were allowed to perform at their actual level during the integrated training exercises that had replaced species-segregated instruction. Watching humans run for hours without tiring while carrying full combat gear had changed many minds about Earth's warrior potential. Commander Zexthul entered the training bay as the exercise began. His jaw had healed, but he still spoke with a slight lisp from the nerve damage Jake's punch had caused. The reptilian instructor had requested to return to training duty, despite offers of administrative positions that would have been easier on his pride. "Cadet Murphy," he called out. Jake jogged over from where he had been helping a crystalline cadet with a mobility drill. The relationship between him and Zexthul remained complicated. There was respect now, but it was built on a foundation of violence that neither of them could forget. "Sir," Jake said, coming to attention, "the new class of human cadets arrives next week," Zexthul said. 63 of them, the largest group Earth has ever sent." Jake nodded. Word had spread throughout Federation space about the Academy's discoveries regarding human capabilities. Earth's military had responded by sending their best candidates rather than the cautious volunteers of previous years. "I want you to brief them on